The first thing I remember after giving birth to Emma was the overwhelming sense of love washing over me. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, her perfect little face peaceful in sleep. I was exhausted but elated. 20 hours of labor had left me drained, but holding my daughter made every moment of pain worth it. She's beautiful, Sarah, the nurse said, adjusting my pillows, just like her mother. I smiled weakly, glancing at the empty chair beside my hospital bed. David should have been here. My husband had left shortly after Emma was born, claiming he needed to handle an urgent business matter. Even on the day his daughter entered the world, Horizon Technologies couldn't wait. That should have been my first warning. The private room at Boston Memorial Hospital was filled with flowers. Roses from my father, lilies from my sister Jen, arrangements from David's business associates. The scent was almost overpowering. Outside my window, the Boston skyline glittered in the fading light. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. How's my granddaughter? Need anything? I smiled. Dad had wanted to be here, but I'd insisted he finish his business trip to Tokyo as CEO of Blackwell Industries. He couldn't just drop everything, even for his first grandchild. Besides, David had promised he'd be by my side the entire time. Another broken promise in a marriage increasingly defined by them. I dozed off, only to wake to the sound of the door opening. The room was dim now, lit only by the soft glow of monitors and the city lights outside. I expected a nurse coming to check my vitals or take Emma to the nursery. Instead, David stumbled in, his expensive suit rumpled, reeking of scotch and perfume. Where have you been? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking Emma in the bassinet beside me. He ignored my question, pacing at the foot of my bed. The Palmer deal is falling apart, he muttered, loosening his tie. Funding's been delayed. Again. David, our daughter was born today, I said, feeling a familiar knot of disappointment tighten in my chest. Can we talk about this tomorrow? He stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. You don't get it, do you? While you've been lying here, I've been scrambling to save our lifestyle. He gestured around the luxury hospital suite. You think this pays for itself? I know things have been difficult at work, but difficult? He laughed, a harsh sound that made Emma stir. Your father's been blocking my expansion into Asia for months. Every investor I approach suddenly backs out, and you wonder why I'm stressed. I sat up straighter, wincing at the pain from my C-section. My father has nothing to do with your business problems. Bullshit. The word cut through the room like a knife. He's always thought I wasn't good enough for his precious daughter, the great Richard Blackwell, thinking he can control everything and everyone. You're drunk? I said quietly. Go home, shower, and come back tomorrow when you're sober. What happened next plays in my mind in slow motion, even now. David's face contorted with rage. He swept his arm across the side table, sending my water pitcher, phone, and the small vase of flowers crashing to the floor. Don't tell me what to do in my own family, he hissed, leaning over me, his face inches from mine. I could smell the alcohol on his breath, see the cold fury in his eyes. I once thought held only love for me. Emma began to cry, startled by the noise. You're scaring her, I said, trying to reach for the call button. David grabbed my wrist, squeezing until I gasped in pain. You've turned into your father, always giving orders, always thinking you know best. David, please, you're hurting me. His open hand connected with my cheek, the crack of the slap echoing in the quiet room. My head snapped to the side, tears springing to my eyes from the shock and pain. For a moment, we both froze. The only sound was Emma's frightened wails and the steady beep of my heart monitor, now accelerating with fear. David stepped back, staring at his hand as if it belonged to someone else. Sarah, The door burst open as a night nurse rushed in. Alerted by Emma's cries, or perhaps the noise of the breaking glass, she took in the scene, the overturned table, the water spreading across the floor, my reddened cheek, and David's disheveled appearance. Is everything okay in here? She asked, her hand already reaching for the security button on her pager. David straightened his jacket, instantly transforming back into the polished businessman the world knew. My wife knocked over her water. I was just helping clean up. The nurse looked at me, questioning. I could see the concern in her eyes, the silent offer of help. All I had to do was tell the truth. Instead, I touched my burning cheek and said everything's fine. My husband was just leaving. After the nurse helped clean up and checked my vitals, assuring herself I was truly fine, she took Emma to the nursery so I could rest. But sleep was impossible. As I lay in the darkness, one thought kept circling. This wasn't the first time David had shown his temper, but it was the first time he'd hit me. I thought about the changes in him over the past year, the increased drinking, the late nights at the office, the tense phone calls he took in private. Our once loving marriage had deteriorated into polite coexistence, punctuated by arguments about his business troubles. My hand found my phone, miraculously unbroken from its fall. I scrolled to my father's contact, my thumb hovering over the call button. Dad had never fully trusted David, had warned me about marrying someone so obsessed with power and money, but I'd been blinded by love and the promise of building a family. If I called him now, told him what had happened, I knew exactly what would follow. Richard Blackwell didn't just protect his family. He destroyed threats to it. Did I want that? Was I ready for the consequences? Dawn was breaking over Boston when I made my decision. With trembling fingers, I texted my sister instead. Need your help? Can you come to the hospital? Don't tell Dad. Then I opened my banking app and transferred half of our joint account into my private account, the one David didn't know about, the one my father had insisted I maintain just in case had arrived. 3 hours later, Jen burst into my room, her face a mask of concern that shifted to horror when she saw the bruise blooming on my cheek. Who did this? She demanded, though I could see in her eyes she already knew. I need a lawyer, I said quietly, cradling Emma in my arms, and I need you to help me get out of here without David knowing. Jen sat on the edge of my bed, taking my free hand in hers. Sarah, we need to call Dad. I shook my head. Not yet. David's right about one thing. Dad will destroy him. And right now I need to focus on protecting Emma. I looked down at my daughter's peaceful face. I promise you this. David will pay for what he's done. Just not in the way he expects. My sister studied my face, seeing something there that made her nod slowly. What's your plan? I stroked Emma's cheek, my resolve hardening. First, we document everything. Then we disappear somewhere safe. And then ... I met Jen's eyes. Then we dismantle the life he values more than his own family. That afternoon, I checked out of Boston Memorial with my newborn daughter, a police report detailing my accidental injuries, and the first threads of a plan that would change everything. David's message that he was giving me space and would see me at home in a few days made it clear he had no idea what was coming. By the time he realized I wasn't coming home, it would be too late. My father's lake house in New Hampshire became our sanctuary. Nestled among pine trees with the view of the water, it was remote enough to feel safe, but close enough to Boston for my lawyer to visit regularly. Dad had purchased it under a shell company years ago, one of his many strategic assets that didn't connect back to Blackwell Industries. For 2 weeks, Emma and I existed in a bubble of relative peace. Jen stayed with us, helping with the baby while I recovered physically and plotted my next moves. My C-section scar was healing. The bruise on my face had faded to a yellowish shadow. The lawyer my sister found, Marianne Chun, specialized in high-profile divorces with domestic violence components. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, reviewing the documents I'd gathered, bank statements, property deeds, text messages, photos of my injuries. Your prenup is solid, she said, pushing her glasses up her nose. The infidelity clause alone gives you leverage. Considering what your private investigator found, I nodded, feeling strangely detached as I looked at the photos of David entering a Boston hotel with his executive assistant. The betrayal should have hurt more, but after the hospital, his affairs seemed almost trivial. What about Emma's trust fund? I asked. Can he access it? Marianne shook her head. The trust your father established is ironclad. David has no claim to it. She hesitated. Sarah, we have enough for a restraining order and a favorable divorce settlement. Is that what you want? I looked out at the lake, watching the afternoon sun create diamonds on its surface. That's only the beginning of what I want. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Package delivered. It was from Alex, my father's head of security, confirming that the surveillance equipment had been installed in David's office in our Boston townhouse. Dad didn't know Alex was helping me. This was my operation, not his. Yet. There's something else, I said, sliding a USB drive across the table to Marianne. Financial records from Horizon Technologies. I need to know if what I'm seeing is correct. She raised an eyebrow. How did you get these? David's password has been Horizon CEO for everything since college, I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. His ego made security an afterthought. That night, after Emma was asleep and Jen had gone to bed, I sat on the dock with my laptop, wrapped in a blanket against the autumn chill. The house lights reflected on the dark water as I logged into the surveillance system. David was in his home office, tie loosened, glass of scotch in hand, arguing with someone on the phone. I don't care what the board wants, he snapped. The Palmer acquisition goes through next week, or heads will roll. He paused, listening. No, the funds are there. I've shown you the accounts. I split my screen, opening the financial documents I'd downloaded. According to these, Horizon Technologies was leveraged to the breaking point. The funds David referred to existed only on paper, a complex shell game of transfers and loans designed to make the company look solvent when it was anything but. David had been lying to his board, his investors, and most significantly to Palmer Tech's CEO, who believed he was selling his life's work to a stable, profitable company. The acquisition was scheduled for next Friday. $5 million would change hands with stock options and performance bonuses to follow. $5 million that Horizon didn't actually have. My finger hovered over my father's contact. One call and Richard Blackwell could expose the fraud, collapse the deal, and probably send David to prison. It would be quick, efficient, and unsatisfying. Because prison was too good for David. He would adapt there, make connections, emerge, eventually with his innate charm and business acumen intact. No, what David deserved was to lose everything he valued, piece by piece, knowing exactly who was taking it from him. Instead of calling my father, I emailed Marianne. Need meeting tomorrow. Bringing in specialized help. The next day, while Jen watched Emma, I drove to a small coffee shop in Portsmouth. Jackson Reed was already waiting, his salt and pepper beard and rumpled blazer making him look more like a college professor than what he actually was, one of the most skilled financial investigators on the East Coast, and someone who owed my father a favor. Ms. Blackwell, he said, standing as I approached. Or should I say, Mrs. Mitchell. Sarah's fine, I replied, sliding into the booth across from him. Thank you for coming. He nodded, opening his laptop. Your father helped me when no one else would. If his daughter needs assistance, I'm available. His eyes flicked to the fading bruise on my cheek, but he said nothing about it. I pushed a folder across the table. Everything I have on Horizon Technologies finances plus David's personal accounts. I need to know every vulnerability, every potential pressure point. Jackson scanned the documents, his expression growing increasingly concerned. This is creative accounting, to put it mildly. Your husband is walking a very thin legal line. Can it be proven? He looked up, studying me. With the right resources and access? Yes. But Sarah, this is serious fraud we're talking about. Federal charges, potentially. I'm aware, I said calmly. What I need to know is how much time we have before it all falls apart on its own. Jackson ran calculations, cross-referencing documents and making notes based on cash flow and upcoming obligations. 3 months, maybe 4, unless this Palmer acquisition goes through, in which case he buys himself another year, possibly 2. I nodded, formulating the next phase of my plan. If someone wanted to accelerate that timeline, hypothetically, what would be the most effective approach? He leaned back, stroking his beard. Hypothetically, target his credit lines. Horizon survives on revolving debt. If those facilities were suddenly called in for review, he shrugged. The house of cards collapses. And who could initiate such a review? Any major creditor with enough influence, the kind with names like Goldman or JP Morgan. He paused, realization dawning. Or Blackwell Financial Services. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Exactly. The following morning, I finally made the call. My father answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "Sarah," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and concern. "How's Emma? How are you?" "We're safe, Dad," I assured him. "But I need to see you, alone." 4 hours later, a helicopter landed on the property's private pad. My father emerged, striding toward the house with the purposeful gait that had intimidated boardrooms for decades. At 62, Richard Blackwell remained an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes that matched my own. His expression softened when he saw Emma in my arms, and he gently took his granddaughter, cradling her with surprising tenderness. "She has your mother's nose," he said quietly, a rare moment of emotion crossing his face. I led him to the study, where I'd prepared files detailing everything: the assault, the affairs, Horizon's precarious finances, and my proposed plan. As he read, his face darkened, the muscle in his jaw twitching with barely controlled rage. "Why didn't you call me immediately?" he finally asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Because I knew what you'd do," I replied. "You'd destroy him without a second thought, and it would be over too quickly." My father studied me, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You want to do it yourself." "I want him to know it was me," I corrected. "I want him to feel every loss, understand every consequence, and know exactly why it's happening." A slow smile spread across my father's face, the same expression I'd seen when competitors underestimated him to their detriment. "You truly are my daughter." We spent the next 3 hours refining my strategy, identifying the precise sequence of financial dominoes that, once tipped, would bring David's empire crashing down around him. My father made calls to key executives at Blackwell Financial Services, carefully worded inquiries that would trigger reviews of Horizon's credit facilities. "The Palmer acquisition is the key," I explained. "If that falls through, everything else unravels." Dad nodded. "I'll have my team approach Palmer directly." A competing offer, significantly higher than David's, contingent on exclusive negotiation. "No," I said firmly. "I don't want Palmer harmed in this. He built a good company with real technology and real people who depend on those jobs." My father raised an eyebrow, impressed. "What do you suggest instead?" "Information," I replied. "Palmer needs to know the truth about Horizon's finances before he signs anything. An anonymous tip to his board and their due diligence team should suffice." Later that evening, after my father had gone and Emma was asleep, I received confirmation that the first phase was complete. Blackwell Financial Services had initiated a comprehensive review of Horizon Technologies' credit facilities, citing routine risk reassessment. David's frantic response played out on my laptop screen as I watched him in his office, shouting into his phone, demanding explanations from his CFO. The fear in his eyes was palpable, even through the surveillance feed. It had begun. The next week passed in a blur of legal meetings and carefully orchestrated financial maneuvers. Marianne filed for divorce and an emergency custody order, citing the assault and evidence of David's unstable behavior. The papers were served to him at Horizon's headquarters, a deliberate public humiliation. Meanwhile, Jackson's analysis of Horizon's accounts revealed even more extensive fraud than initially suspected. David had been falsifying revenue reports for at least 2 years, creating phantom projects and clients to maintain the illusion of growth. I forwarded this information anonymously to Palmer Tech's legal team 3 days before the acquisition was set to close. The results were immediate and devastating. Palmer pulled out of the deal, publicly citing irreconcilable discrepancies in financial representations. Horizon stock plummeted 40% in a single day. The banks already alerted to potential issues by Blackwell Financial's review. froze Horizon's credit lines pending a full audit. From my sanctuary in New Hampshire, I watched the destruction unfold on financial news channels. Analysts who had once praised David's visionary leadership now questioned how such fraud had gone undetected for so long. Investors filed lawsuit. The SEC announced an investigation. And still, it wasn't enough. Because each night as I watched David through the surveillance cameras, I saw him plotting his comeback, making calls to wealthy friends, transferring personal assets to offshore accounts, preparing to abandon the sinking ship of Horizon while preserving his own fortune. It was time for the final phase. "Are you sure about this?" my sister asked as I packed a small overnight bag. "He's dangerous, Sarah. Let Dad handle the rest." I zipped the bag closed, checking that the voice recorder was securely hidden in my jacket pocket. "David needs to hear it from me. He needs to understand why this is happening." "At least let Alex go with you," Jen pleaded, referring to our father's security chief. "He'll be nearby," I assured her. "But this conversation needs to be private." The drive back to Boston felt surreal. 3 weeks had passed since I'd fled the hospital with Emma. 3 weeks of executing a plan that had systematically dismantled David's business and reputation. Now I was voluntarily returning to the man who had struck me at my most vulnerable moment, but I wasn't the same woman who had left. That Sarah had been afraid. This one was vengeful. Our townhouse in Beacon Hill was dark when I arrived, save for a single light in David's study. Using my key, I entered silently, hearing the clink of ice in a glass and the murmur of one-sided conversation. "I don't care what it takes," David was saying into his phone. "Find out who leaked those documents to Palmer." He paused. "When I discover who's behind this, they'll regret ever crossing me." I stepped into the doorway. "You don't have to look far." David spun around, nearly dropping his phone. For a moment, he stared at me as if seeing a ghost. Then his face contorted with anger. "You," he hissed. "Where's my daughter?" "Safe," I replied, remaining in the doorway. "Away from you." He stood, swaying slightly from the alcohol. "You think you can just take my child?" "The courts will. The courts have already granted me emergency custody," I interrupted. "Given your assault on me in the hospital, which, by the way, 3 nurses witnessed, you'll be lucky to get supervised visitation." David's face paled. "That was a mistake." I was stressed. "I'd been drinking. Save it for the judge," I said coldly. "I'm not here for apologies." "Then why are you here?" he demanded, taking a step toward me. I held my ground. "To tell you that I know everything. The falsified revenue reports, the offshore accounts, the money you've been siphoning from company pension funds." He froze. "What are you talking about?" "I have copies of everything, David. Every fraudulent document, every illegal transfer. The SEC has received an anonymous package with enough evidence to put you away for a decade." His eyes narrowed. "This is Richard's doing. Your father has been trying to destroy me from day one." I laughed, the sounds sharp and humorless. "My father wanted to destroy you the moment he learned you hit me, but this was all me. You?" Disbelief colored his voice. "You don't have the knowledge or the resources to dismantle the house of cards you built?" I stepped further into the room, enjoying the way he retreated behind his desk. "You forgot who I am, David. You were so busy playing the brilliant CEO that you forgot you married a Blackwell. I grew up watching my father build and break companies before breakfast." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by fury. "You bitch. You've ruined everything I've worked for." "No," I corrected him. "You did that yourself. I just accelerated the timeline." He lunged then, alcohol and rage overriding his reason. But I was prepared, stepping aside and pressing the panic button in my pocket. Within seconds, Alex was through the door, restraining David with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Mitchell," Alex said calmly, though his grip was anything but gentle, "I suggest you reconsider your actions." David struggled briefly before going limp, the fight draining out of him as the reality of his situation sank in. His business was collapsing, his reputation destroyed, his freedom in jeopardy. And now even his home was invaded by his wife's protectors. "You won't get away with this," he muttered, but the threat sounded hollow even to him. I moved to the desk, opening his laptop. "Your passwords are still embarrassingly predictable," I commented, typing in Horizon CEO and accessing his email. "Let's see. ... Yes, here it is. Your resignation letter to the Horizon board, effective immediately, citing personal reasons and health concerns." "I never wrote that," he snarled. "But you're going to send it," I replied, turning the screen toward him. "Because if you don't, the evidence package that's currently being held by my attorney gets delivered to the FBI instead of just the SEC. And trust me, they'll be much less forgiving." David stared at me, hatred and a grudging respect warring in his eyes. "What happened to you?" "This isn't the Sarah I married." "You're right," I agreed, my voice steady. "The Sarah you married was blinded by love and promises. That woman died the moment you raised your hand to her, hours after she gave birth to your child." I nodded to Alex, who released David but remained vigilantly close. David rubbed his wrists, looking suddenly smaller in his expensive suit. "Send the email, David. Then pack what you need and leave. The house is in my name anyway. Another detail you were too arrogant to notice when we bought it." For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then, with a defeated slump of his shoulders, he moved to the laptop and pressed send. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "You have no idea what you've done." I leaned close, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've done exactly what you taught me. Identified a weakness and exploited it mercilessly." "Your weakness was thinking I was one of yours." As I turned to leave, David called after me, "Where's Emma? I have a right to see my daughter." I paused in the doorway. "Your parental rights are currently under review by the family court. Your lawyer will be contacted when a decision is made." Outside, the cool night air filled my lungs as I walked to my car where my father's driver waited. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks finally began to lift. Phase 1 was complete. David was neutralized, Horizon was imploding, and Emma and I were safe. But as I settled into the back seat, my phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. "Found something in the Cayman accounts. Call immediately." The war, it seemed, was not yet over. "The money trail leads back to Blackwell Industries," Jackson said, his voice grave through the speakerphone. "Specifically, to subsidiaries managed by your father's CFO, Michael Bennett." I sat at the kitchen table in the lake house, staring at the financial diagrams Jackson had emailed. It was 2 a.m., and the house was silent except for the occasional creak of the old wooden structure settling. "Are you saying David was working with someone inside my father's company?" I asked, though the evidence on my screen was clear. "Not just working with them," Jackson clarified. "Based on these transfers, David was being funded by them. Horizon's expansion into Asia, the one that kept mysteriously stalling? The capital came from shell companies that trace back to Blackwell subsidiaries." My mind raced. My father would never approve this. He hated David's business model, which suggests either Bennett was operating without your father's knowledge, quote quotes, or my father knew. Exactly what was happening, I finished, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. I thanked Jackson and ended the call, then sat in the darkness, trying to make sense of this new information. Why would my father secretly fund David's company while publicly opposing it? And why would Bennett risk his career to facilitate such transactions? The questions gnawed at me as I moved to the window, watching moonlight play across the lake's surface. My father was due to visit tomorrow to discuss next steps now that David had been removed from Horizon's leadership. Would I confront him then, or investigate further first? Sleep eluded me that night. By dawn, I had made my decision. I called Alex, my father's security chief, who had been helping me. "I need access to Bennett's email," I said without preamble when he answered. There was a pause. "Ms. Blackwell, that's beyond my authorization. Mr. Bennett's communications are protected by..." "Alex," I interrupted. "Someone at Blackwell Industries has been funding my husband's fraud. If it's Bennett, my father needs to know. If it's someone else, I need to know." Another pause, longer this time. Give me 4 hours. True to his word, Alex delivered. By noon, I had access to Michael Bennett's Blackwell email account, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. Regular communications between Bennett and my father discussing Project Horizon, coded language about controlling the competition and keeping enemies closer. Strategy documents outlining a plan to fund David's expansion. Let him overextend, then acquire Horizon's assets, add pennies on the dollar once the company inevitably failed. My father hadn't just known about Bennett's funding of David, he had orchestrated it. I was still processing this betrayal when the sound of helicopter blades cut through the air. My father had arrived for our scheduled meeting. I closed the laptop, composed my face, and went to greet him. Richard Blackwell stepped from the helicopter looking every inch the corporate Titan-tailored suit. Confident stride, the easy authority of a man accustomed to controlling rooms and lives. He embraced me warmly, then immediately asked to see Emma. We spent 30 minutes with my daughter, my father genuinely doting on his granddaughter. It was disorienting to reconcile this loving grandfather with the calculating manipulator revealed in Bennett's emails. Finally, with Emma down for her nap, we moved to the study to discuss business. David's resignation has been accepted by the board. My father began, pouring himself a scotch from the decanter on the sideboard. Horizon's stock has fallen another 30%. Their major clients are jumping ship. He smiled, raising his glass in a toast. You've done impressive work, Sarah, have I? I asked quietly. Or have I just played my part in your script? My father's smile faltered. What do you mean? I opened my laptop, turning it to face him. On the screen was an email from him to Bennett, dated 18 months ago. Sarah's marriage provides the perfect cover. Mitchell will never suspect the funding comes from us. When the time is right, we'll pull the plug and acquire the valuable pieces of Horizon at fire sale prices. The color drained from my father's face. For perhaps the first time in his life, Richard Blackwell was speechless. Project Horizon, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. That's what you called it. Using my marriage, my life, as a business strategy. He set down his glass, composing himself. Sarah, you're missing the context. David was dangerous, a financial predator. He'd already targeted 3 smaller tech companies, stripped them for parts, left hundreds unemployed. When he set his sights on you, I had to what? I demanded. Manipulate my life instead of being honest with me? Let me marry a man you knew was corrupt? I tried to warn you, he countered. You wouldn't listen. You were in love. He almost spat the last word. So yes, I adapted. Found a way to protect you and contain the damage Mitchell could do by funding his fraud? I laughed bitterly. How was that protecting me? My father leaned forward, his expression intense, because I controlled the funding. I could cut it off any time he crossed a line. It was insurance. Then why didn't you cut it off when he hit me? The question hung in the air between us, damning in its simplicity. My father looked away. I didn't know about that until you showed me. By then, you had already set your plan in motion. I stood unable to sit still with the anger coursing through me. You used me. You used my marriage, my pain, for a business acquisition. That's unfair, he protested. Everything I've done has been to protect you and Blackwell Industries. The two aren't separate, sir. One day the company will be yours. Everything I do is to secure that legacy. I stared at him, this man I'd idolized my entire life. Did Mom know about how you operate? A flash of genuine pain crossed his face. Your mother understood that in our world, business and personal lines blur. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't burden her with them. Well, I'm asking, I said. I want every detail of Project Horizon, every manipulation, every lie. For the next hour, my father outlined the truth. How he'd discovered David's interest in me wasn't coincidental. David had deliberately pursued me as a way to gain leverage against Blackwell Industries. How, rather than warn me directly, my father had decided to turn the tables, using Bennett to secretly fund Horizon while installing surveillance in David's offices. The plan was to let him overextend, then offer a bailout in exchange for control, my father explained. You and Emma would have been protected financially. David would have been neutralized as a threat, all without my knowledge or consent, I added coldly. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was protecting you from difficult choices. No, I corrected him. You were protecting your control. Over me, over the company, over everything in your orbit. My father sighed, suddenly looking his age. Perhaps you're right. Power becomes a habit, Sarah. The habit of a lifetime is hard to break. He met my eyes directly. But never doubt that I love you and Emma. Everything I've done, however misguided, came from that love. I wanted to hate him in that moment, to throw him out of the house and cut him from my life. But the painful truth was that I understood him. Hadn't I just orchestrated David's downfall through equally manipulative means? The apple, it seemed, hadn't fallen far from the tree. What happens now? I asked finally. That depends on you, he replied. David is finished either way. The question is what you want to do about Horizon itself. I considered this. Horizon Technologies employed over 300 people, many of them brilliant engineers who had no part in David's fraud. Their projects, particularly their work on medical imaging software, had genuine potential to help people. I want to save the legitimate parts of the company, I decided. The people and projects that deserve a second chance. My father nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. That can be arranged. Blackwell Industries could acquire the medical imaging division, retain the staff, fund the research properly. No, I said firmly, not Blackwell. I'll do it myself. He raised an eyebrow. With what capital? My trust fund. Plus the settlement from David? I straightened in my chair. It's time I built something of my own, not just tore things down. A slow smile spread across my father's face, not the predatory one I'd seen when discussing David's destruction, but something warmer, genuinely proud. You're going to be a better CEO than I ever was. That's not saying much right now, I replied, but there was no real venom in the words. We spent the rest of the afternoon hammering out a strategy. My father would recuse himself from any Blackwell decisions regarding Horizon to avoid conflicts of interest. I would establish a new company to acquire Horizon's medical imaging division and key personnel. Bennett would face consequences for his role in the deception, not public exposure, which could damage Blackwell Industries, but internal demotion and a structured exit over the next year. There's still one piece we haven't addressed, my father said as evening approached. David himself. I looked up from my notes. His resignation has been accepted. The SEC investigation will keep him occupied. What more is there? Sarah, my father's voice took on a warning tone. Men like David don't simply accept defeat, especially when they believe they've been betrayed. He'll look for revenge. Let him try, I said dismissively. What can he do? His reputation is ruined, his company collapsing. He has no leverage. My father leaned forward. He has knowledge about Project Horizon, about Blackwell's involvement. If he can prove our connection to his funding, double quotes. The implication was clear. If David could demonstrate that Blackwell Industries had knowingly funded fraudulent activities at Horizon, the scandal would engulf my father's company as well. So what are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A final settlement, he replied carefully. Enough money to ensure his silence and departure. Perhaps a position with one of our subsidiaries overseas. I stood abruptly. Absolutely not. I won't reward him for what he did to me. This isn't about reward, Sarah. It's about containment. No, I said firmly. David made his choices. Now he can face the consequences. If that means he tries to drag Blackwell down with him, so be it. My father studied me for a long moment. You'd risk the company your grandfather built, that your children will inherit. I'd risk anything to avoid teaching Emma that men who hurt women get rewarded for it, I replied. Find another solution. After my father left, I sat on the dock watching the sunset, trying to process everything I'd learned. My marriage had been manipulated from the start, David using me to get to my father using me to control David. I'd been a pawn in their corporate chess match, never a true partner, too, either. The realization should have devastated me. Instead, it strengthened my resolve. If both men had underestimated me, treated me as a piece to be played rather than a player in my own right, I would show them and everyone else exactly what Sarah Blackwell was capable of. My phone rang, displaying a Boston number I didn't recognize. Sarah Mitchell? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Sarah Blackwell, I corrected automatically. Who's this? Elaine Palmer, she replied. My husband founded Palmer Technologies, the company your husband tried to acquire through fraud. My grip tightened on the phone. Mrs. Palmer, I'm sorry for what happened, but I've had nothing to do with— I know, she interrupted. That's why I'm calling. We've spoken with your lawyer, Ms. Chun. She explained your situation and your efforts to expose the fraud before the acquisition went through. I remained silent, unsure where this was heading. My husband and I would like to meet with you, she continued. We have a proposition that might interest you, particularly regarding Horizon's medical imaging technology. 2 days later, I sat across from Robert and Elaine Palmer in a private dining room at the Four Seasons in Boston. Robert was in his 60s, a brilliant engineer who had built Palmer Tech from a garage startup into a respected medical technology company. Elaine, a decade younger, served as the company's CFO and strategist. We've reviewed Horizon's imaging software, Robert explained after pleasantries were exchanged. It's revolutionary potentially. The development team is talented, but underfunded and mismanaged under your husband's leadership. Ex-husband, I corrected, though the divorce wasn't yet final. And I agree. That's why I've been working to salvage that division before Horizon completely collapses. Elaine nodded approvingly. That's precisely why we wanted to meet. Instead of competing to acquire those assets, we propose a partnership. Over the next hour, they outlined their vision, a new joint venture between Palmer Tech and my yet-to-be-formed company, focusing exclusively on medical imaging technology. Palmer would provide infrastructure and distribution channels. I would bring Horizon's team and intellectual property. We would share ownership equally. Why me? I asked bluntly. You could acquire these assets directly once Horizon declares bankruptcy. Robert and Elaine exchanged glances. 2 reasons, Elaine said. First, we admire your integrity in exposing the fraud. You could have remained silent, allowed your husband's deception to enrich you both. And second, Robert added, we've done our research on you, Sarah. Your work in healthcare administration before your marriage, your master's thesis on technology integration in patient care. You understand both the business and human aspects of medical technology in ways we value. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of genuine excitement. This wasn't about revenge or damage control. It was about building something meaningful. I'll need to review the details with my attorneys, I said, but in principle, I'm interested. As we were finishing our meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Jen, SOS. David showed up at the lake house looking for you. Alex intercepted him, but he was furious. Call me ASAP. My blood ran cold. Excuse me, I said to the Palmers, stepping away to call my sister. He was ranting about betrayal and revenge, Jen explained, her voice shaking. Said he knew all about Richard's little scheme and would bring you both down. Alex convinced him you weren't here, but Sarah, he looked dangerous. Is Emma okay? I asked, my heart racing. She's fine. We're both fine. Alex has extra security watching the property. I thanked her and ended the call, trying to compose myself before returning to the Palmers. Everything all right? Elaine asked, concern evident in her voice. Just a family matter, I replied automatically, then reconsidered. If we were going to be partners, they deserved honesty. Actually, no. My ex-husband is making threats. He's discovered connections between his company and my father's. That could be problematic if exposed. Rather than backing away, the Palmers' interest seemed to intensify. We suspected something wasn't right about his funding, Robert said thoughtfully. The expansion into Asia never made financial sense for a company Horizon's size. Tell us everything, Elaine urged. If we're partnering, We need to understand all the risks. So I did. I explained Project Horizon, my father's manipulation, Bennett's role, and David's potential leverage. When I finished, I expected them to withdraw their offer, unwilling to associate with such complications. Instead, Robert smiled. Well, that clarifies much, and actually strengthens our resolve to work with you. How so? I asked, bewildered. Because you've demonstrated that even when faced with personal and family conflicts, you choose transparency and integrity, Elaine explained. That's exactly the partner we want. As for David's threats, they were unconcerned. Let him try, Robert said dismissively. Between Palmer's legal team and Blackwell's resources, he won't get far. And if some uncomfortable truths about corporate maneuvering come to light, well, that's hardly shocking in today's business world. I left the meeting with a signed letter of intent for our joint venture, and something I hadn't felt since before Emma's birth. Hope. That hope was short-lived. When I returned to my father's Boston apartment, where I'd been staying temporarily, the doorman handed me an envelope that had been delivered by courier. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Thought you should see what your father really thinks of you. D. My hands trembling, I inserted the drive into my laptop. It contained a single video-filed security footage from my father's office, dated 3 years ago, shortly after I'd started dating David. In it, my father sat at his desk with Michael Bennett across from him. Mitchell's getting serious with Sarah, my father was saying. I need options. Bennett shuffled some papers. We've completed the background check. His business practices are aggressive, borderline unethical, but he's careful to stay just within legal boundaries. I don't care about legal boundaries, my father snapped. I care about my daughter. Mitchell is using her to get to me, to Blackwell. With respect, sir, Bennett replied, Sarah is a grown woman with her own mind. If you oppose this relationship directly, you might push her further into his arms. My father sighed, rubbing his temples. You're right. He's always been stubborn, just like her mother. He straightened in his chair. So, we adapt. If Mitchell wants access to Blackwell through my daughter, we'll give him exactly what he wants on our terms. Project Horizon, Bennett said, understanding dawning on his face. Use Mitchell's company as a controlled burn. Precisely. Fund his expansion secretly, let him believe he's winning. Then pull the plug when it serves us best. My father's expression hardened. Sarah will be hurt temporarily when it all falls apart, but better a short pain than a lifetime tied to a predator like Mitchell. And if she discovers our involvement? Bennett asked. My father's answer chilled me to the bone. She won't. Sarah's brilliant in many ways, but business isn't her strength. She sees the world through an idealist's lens all that time in healthcare administration, wanting to help people. He shook his head. She'll believe whatever narrative we present when Mitchell falls. The video ended, leaving me staring at a blank screen, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just the manipulation that hurt. A win was my father's dismissal of me. His certainty that I could be so easily fooled because I cared about helping people rather than corporate chess games. I was still sitting there when my phone rang. David, against my better judgment, I answered. What do you want? Did you enjoy the video? He asked, his voice smug even in defeat. Daddy dearest isn't quite the protector you thought, is he? You've made your point, I said flatly. What now? Blackmail? He laughed. I considered it, but revenge is sweeter. By now, similar videos are being delivered to the SEC investigators handling my case, the Wall Street Journal, and Horizon's board members. The great Richard Blackwell, exposed as a corporate puppet master who sacrificed his own daughter. My mind raced. You're destroying yourself too. That footage proves you knew about the fraudulent funding. Worth it, David replied, his voice hardening. You took everything from me, Sarah, my company, my reputation, my daughter. Fair's fair. After he hung up, I sat motionless, trying to process this new disaster. The scandal would be enormous. Blackwell Industries stock would plummet. My father might face charges. The company that had been in my family for 3 generations could collapse, and with it, the livelihoods of thousands of employees. All because 2 egotistical men had used me as a pawn in their games. My phone rang again, my father this time. I let it go to voicemail, then another call from an unknown number. When I finally answered, it was a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, asking for comment on allegations of financial manipulation between Blackwell Industries and Horizon Technologies. It had begun. Over the next 48 hours, the story exploded across financial news. Blackwell scandal. CEO orchestrated son-in-law's business failure, read one headline. Corporate family feud leads to market turmoil, declared another. Blackwell Industries stock fell 22% in a single day. My father issued a statement acknowledging strategic investments in Horizon, but denying any wrongdoing. David gave interviews portraying himself as the victim of his father-in-law's vendetta. I remained silent, holed up in my father's apartment with Emma, ignoring calls from everyone except Jen and my lawyers. On the third day, as the media frenzy continued unabated, Elaine Palmer called. "Are we still partners?" I asked without preamble, expecting her to back out of our deal. "More than ever," she replied firmly. "Robert and I have been discussing the situation. We have a proposal, one that could resolve this mess and save what matters most. I'm listening. Meet us tomorrow at our lawyer's office. Bring your father." When I hung up, I finally called my father back. His voice sounded exhausted. "The board is demanding my resignation," he said without greeting. 30 years building this company, and it comes apart in 3 days. "You did this to yourself," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "You and David both." A long silence. "Yes," he finally said. "We did. I owe you an apology, Sarah. Several, in fact. It was the first time I could remember my father admitting fault so directly." "I'll accept it later," I said. "Right now we have a meeting tomorrow with the Palmers, their lawyer's office, 10 a.m. "The Palmers?" he asked, confused. "What could they possibly want with us now?" "Apparently a solution," I replied. "And at this point we need one." The next morning we gathered in the conference room of Boston's most prestigious law firm. Robert and Elaine Palmer sat on one side of the table with their team of attorneys. My father and I sat opposite them with Marianne Chun beside me. Robert opened the meeting. "The situation is dire but not unsalvageable. We've developed a restructuring plan that could protect the core of Blackwell Industries while addressing the ethical and legal concerns raised by recent revelations." Over the next 2 hours, they outlined their proposal. Blackwell Industries would be reorganized. My father would step down as CEO and chair of the board, accepting full responsibility for the strategic error of secretly funding Horizon. The company would pay a substantial settlement to shareholders and regulatory authorities. Meanwhile, the planned joint venture between Palmer and my new company would expand to include acquisition of key Blackwell divisions, those untainted by the scandal and aligned with healthcare technology. "Essentially," Elaine explained, "we're proposing a controlled dismantling of the old Blackwell Industries and the birth of something new, a company focused on healthcare technology rather than financial manipulation." My father stared at the documents before him. "You're asking me to surrender the company my father built?" "Part of it," Robert corrected. "The rest was going to be lost to lawsuits and regulatory actions anyway. This way, at least the valuable pieces and the jobs they represent survive." "Under whose leadership?" my father asked, though I suspected he already knew the answer. All eyes turned to me. "Sarah would serve as CEO of the new combined entity," Elaine confirmed. "With you, Richard, as a special advisor with no board position or operational control." My father looked at me, a question in his eyes. I knew what he was asking. Was this my idea? My revenge for his manipulation? "I didn't orchestrate this," I told him quietly, "but I think it's the right solution." He nodded slowly, the fight draining from him. "What about Mitchell?" "David is a separate problem," Robert said. "Our lawyers believe his role in the fraud, combined with the assault charges, will keep him occupied with his own legal troubles. But, to be safe, the settlement agreement includes a comprehensive non-disclosure clause for all parties. By the end of the day, the framework was established. My father would announce his retirement, framing the reorganization as his final act of leadership, protecting the company by stepping away from it. I would emerge as the head of the new healthcare-focused enterprise, combining Blackwell's infrastructure with Horizon's innovation and Palmer's market position. As we left the law firm, my father and I walked silently to our waiting cars. Before we parted, he turned to me. "I underestimated you," he said simply. "I won't make that mistake again." No, I agreed. You won't, because from now on, we're either honest partners or nothing at all. He nodded, looking suddenly older than his years. "Your mother would be proud of you today. Not of me, but of you." As I watched his car pull away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for what had been lost, determination for what lay ahead, and, surprisingly, a measure of peace. The manipulation and lies that had defined my recent life were finally exposed. In their place, I could build something new, something honest. My phone buzzed with a text from Jen. "Emma's asking for Mama. Coming home soon?" Home? Not my father's apartment, or David's townhouse, or even the lake house refuge. A new home for a new beginning. On my way, I texted back. Then I added, "Everything's going to be different now." 1 year later, I stood at the podium in the newly renovated headquarters of Blackwell Palmer Medical Technologies, addressing our employees and the assembled press. Behind me, a banner displayed our company's mission: advancing healthcare through technology, integrity, and innovation. "Today marks not just the successful completion of our merger," I said, my voice carrying through the packed auditorium, "but the fulfillment of a promise to create a company where ethical business practices and life-changing innovation go hand in hand." Emma, now 14 months old, squirmed in my sister's arms at the front row. I smiled at her before continuing. "Our medical imaging platform has now been adopted by 12 major hospital systems nationwide. Our patient data security protocols have set new industry standards, and I'm proud to announce that our scholarship program for women in medical technology has awarded its first 20 grants to promising students across the country." Applause filled the room. From my position, I could see Robert and Elaine Palmer beaming with pride. Beside them sat my father, more subdued but nodding in approval. The past year had aged him, but our relationship had slowly begun to heal through weekly dinners and his genuine efforts to be a better grandfather to Emma than he had been a father to me. After the presentation, as employees and guests mingled at the reception, I retreated to my office for a brief moment of quiet. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston's skyline stretched before me, the same view I'd had from my hospital room the day Emma was born, though from a different building now. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Marianne Chun entered, elegant as always in her tailored suit. "Congratulations, Sarah," she said warmly. "Quite a transformation in just a year for the company." "Or for me?" I asked with a smile. "Both." She placed a folder on my desk. "I thought you'd want to see this right away. The judge signed off on the final disposition of David's case this morning." I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. David had eventually pled guilty to reduced charges of financial fraud and securities violations, with the assault charge as leverage. My lawyers had negotiated a settlement that included a 10-year non-compete agreement, permanent surrender of any claims to Emma, and his relocation to a minimum of 3,000 miles from Boston. "So, he's officially gone," I said, feeling a strange emptiness where I'd expected satisfaction. "Last I heard, he took a consulting position in Dubai," Marianne confirmed. "The terms of his probation allow him to work overseas as long as he checks in regularly with his probation officer." I nodded, closing the folder. "And Blackwell Industries? The remaining divisions, restructuring is complete. Your father's successor has streamlined operations to focus on the financial services and real estate portfolios. Stock has recovered about 60% of its losses from the scandal." When Marianne left, I stood by the window again, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. The media had eventually lost interest in our family drama, distracted by newer scandals. My father had retreated from public life, focusing on rebuilding his relationship with me and becoming a devoted grandfather to Emma. The joint venture with the Palmers had exceeded all expectations, our combined expertise creating something stronger than any of our separate companies had been. I'd found my calling as a leader who balanced business success with ethical considerations and employee well-being. My phone chimed with a reminder. Emma's pediatrician appointment in an hour, CEO or not. Some priorities remained constant. As I gathered my things to leave, my assistant announced an unexpected visit. Eichel Bennett, my father's former CFO, who had been quietly pushed out of Blackwell Industries during the reorganization. 5 minutes, I told my assistant. Then I have to leave for an appointment. Bennett entered hesitantly, looking significantly less polished than during his CFO days. He'd aged noticeably in the past year, his hair grayer, his posture less confident. "Thank you for seeing me, Sarah," he said, remaining standing even when I gestured toward a chair. "I'll be brief. I wanted to apologize in person for my role in Project Horizon and everything that followed." I studied him, remembering his willingness to manipulate my life at my father's direction. "Why now, Michael? It's been a year." He shifted uncomfortably. "I've been in therapy working through some things. Making amends is part of the process." He paused. "And I've been offered a position with a firm in Chicago. Before accepting, I wanted to clear the air with you. I appreciate the gesture," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure what you want from me." "Not forgiveness," he clarified quickly. "Just acknowledgement, perhaps, that despite everything, some good came from the wreckage. You've built something remarkable here." He gestured to the office, the building, the company around us. I considered his words, realizing there was truth in them. From the ashes of manipulation, betrayal, and violence had risen something worthwhile, not just a successful company, but my own strength and clarity of purpose. "I wish you well in Chicago, Michael," I said finally. And yes, something good did emerge from it all. Not because of what you and my father did, but despite it. After he left, I gathered my purse and headed out. My assistant reminded me about tomorrow's board meeting and the product development review scheduled for Friday. The everyday rhythm of business continued, a comforting normalcy after so much upheaval. In the lobby, I found Jen waiting with Emma, who squealed with delight at seeing me and reached out her arms. As I held my daughter close, breathing in her baby's shampoo scent, a sense of profound gratitude washed over me. Life had not gone according to plan, far from it. My marriage had been built on lies, my family relationships tested to breaking point, my professional path diverted drastically from what I'd imagined. Yet here I stood, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having been fooled, more compassionate for having suffered. As we stepped outside into the bright Boston afternoon, Emma pointed excitedly at a passing dog, her entire body wiggling with joy at the simple pleasure. I held her hand, savoring the moment. "Where to now, C.A.O. Blackwell?" Jen asked with a teasing smile. I looked at my daughter, then back at the building bearing my family name alongside Palmer's, a symbol of both legacy and fresh beginnings. "Forward," I replied simply. "Always forward." In the hospital room after giving birth, when David struck me, he believed he was demonstrating his power. Instead, he revealed his weakness. My father, orchestrating his corporate chess game, thought he was protecting me through control rather than truth. Both men, in their own ways, underestimated what I could endure, what I could discover, and what I could build from the ruins of their manipulation. As Emma and I walked toward the pediatrician's office, I realized the most valuable lesson from this painful chapter. True strength isn't found in power over others, but in the courage to stand firmly in your own truth, even when that truth has been distorted by those you trusted most. The company I now led wasn't just a business success story. It was tangible proof that endings can become beginnings, that betrayal can lead to wisdom, and that sometimes the hardest blows life delivers are the ones that finally show us who we truly are. The millionaire husband who hit me in my hospital bed had inadvertently set me free. The CEO father who manipulated my life had ultimately empowered me to take control of it. And I, who had once defined myself through their eyes, now saw my own reflection. Clearly a mother, a leader, a survivor, and finally, unapologetically myself.